the one, the only Benzion.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Yeshiva YouTube. Iyun with Benzion. Today's daf is Benzion Gittin daf Mem Zayin number 47. There's an important machlokas over here on Mem Zayin and Aleph between Rabbah and Rabbi Elazar, two Amoraim. The question is, if you sell a field in Eretz Yisrael to a non-Jewish person, does he really own that, or to what extent does he own that? Rabbah says, there is a kinyan, meaning basically, if he buys a field, right, we know Truas and Maishos only apply in Eretz Yisrael, and they only apply to a field of a Jewish person. Let's say a non-Jewish person, does it become like not part of Eretz Yisrael anymore? That's seemingly what Rabbah is saying it doesn't. Rabbah is saying that Kedusha, like the Gemara says, Kili Ares, Li Kedusha's Ares. Eretz Yisrael always belongs to God. A non-Jewish person, he might have ownership over the rights to dig the field, to make wells over there, ditches, to make caves. He can do whatever he wants to the land. But anything that grows in the land, it's considered Kedusha Eretz Yisrael. He can't remove Kedusha. Kedusha Eretz Yisrael is in the land. He can't remove it. That's the simple understanding of Rabbah. Rabbi Elazar argued. Elazar says no, that they could own the land, and whatever they own, there's no chiyuv in Shemos HaMaisros. They're right. There's no chiyuv in Shemos HaMaisros. Shemos HaMaisros apply to Eretz Yisrael, but only the land that's owned by Yisrael. If it's owned by a non-Jew, so then they're not chayiv in mitzvos, a non-Jew, and they own the land of Eretz Yisrael, so there's no chiyuv in Shemos HaMaisros. Anything that goes to their land, there's no Shemos HaMaisros. But he says the opposite. But they don't have the right to make boros shich no maros. So they say the opposite of each other in two different fashions. I'd like to explain the machlokas as follows. That we've talked about, there's two different types of ownership. There's shalom and b'reshuso. Shalom means I own the physical thing. B'reshuso means I own the conceptual thing, the concept, intellectual property or domain. I have the rights, the property rights, the rights to something. And those can oftentimes, a lot of times they go together, but sometimes you can separate them. Companies sell their intellectual property sometimes, but without selling the physical stores or something like that. It just happened. The company. So sometimes you can divide these two, Shalo and Bershuso. Now, the ability to work the actual land is an element of Shalo, right? So according to Rabbah, the first explanation, Rabbah learns that when a non-Jew purchases land in Eretz Yisrael, that physical land belongs to the non-Jew. However, what he's saying is that still chayav in Shumas HaMaisros is because he doesn't own Bershuso. He doesn't get the domain. The domain name on the internet is not in his name. It's not his name. It's still in the name of the Jew, right? It's still in the Jew's name, and therefore it's chayav in Shumas HaMaisros. The Bershuso, that's what the Torah says. Kili Aretz. Hashem saying it belongs to me. A non-Jew could never take that Reshuso away from a Jew. And therefore, it's chayiv in Shumas HaMaisros. And likewise, last year was Shemitah year. Likewise, it would be Shemitah land, and whatever group, you can't work that land. Even if he's sold to a non-Jew, there's a heter mechira to talk about. There's a heter to sell land in Eretz Yisrael to a non-Jewish person. That's one question, whether you can even do it or not. And if you do it, does the produce have status of Shemitah or not? A lot of Rabbanim, including the Rav of the Shul, hold that it still has the din of Eretz Yisrael. And like Rabbah's opinion, it seems to be accepted the halacha. It has still Kedushas Aretz. Rabbi Elazar argues. We don't pass it. Rabbi Elazar argues, says the exact opposite. He says, no, that when you sell land in Eretz Yisrael from a Yisrael to a non-Jew, so the non-Jew has domain over it, right? He has domain over it. Therefore, Shumas HaMaisros, which is the produce of the land, the domain, what ends up growing from the land, that is exempt of Shumas HaMaisros. However, he doesn't own Shalo, the goof of the land, therefore he can't do whatever he wants to the land. He can't. That's what part of the Torah says. The Torah says, Shemayim Shenemar L'Hashem Haaretz, right? Kili Haaretz. Hashem retains, in some aspect, the Torah says he retains ownership over the lands. You can't do whatever you want to it. You can't destroy the land. You can't make ditches. You can't make caves out of the land. But you do own it vis-a-vis Trumas and Maisos. And therefore it's Pater in Trumas and Maisos. And therefore it would follow that Shemitah also would be Pater any produce that grows during the Shemitah year is not chayav in Hilchos Shemitah, and therefore you can do whatever you want with it. And therefore, if you go to the supermarket, you buy fruits that were grown in a farm that was owned by a non-Jew, there's no Hilchos Shemitah that apply to it. It's non-Jewish produce, non-Eretz Israel produce, and you can do whatever you want. You don't have to be careful not to throw it out, not to waste it, and things like that. Various halachas that apply during Shemitah. Fortunately, my in-laws were making on this halacha, but it seems to be a little difficult to understand because it seems we pass like Rabbah, and if you pass like Rabbah, just like he can't acquire it for Trumas and Maishos, so too a non-Jew can't acquire it for Shemitah also. So therefore, I'd like to make a chiluk because I believe it's true that Shemitah does not apply, and the difference is that Trumas and Maishos, Achiv and Trumas and Maishos, come from the domain of the land, the reshus of the land, right? What is Trumas and Maishos? Trumas and Maishos is basically, right, when I harvest all of my produce. It's the end result of my produce. I plant the field, I work it, and it grows. The end, the totzah, the result is produce, and out of that produce I have to tithe. I have to take off certain portions, give to a Kohen, give to the Levium, give to the Aniyim. So it's tithing. That's the result of the land. That's the domain of the land, reshus of the land. And that is what Rabbah says, right? The reshus never trend. The shalom, you can make ditches in the land. You have control over the mass, the physical land. But the domain of the land, the control of the land, you don't have control over it. But Shemitah has nothing to do with it. Hilchos Shemitah has to do with the gufa karka, right? Shemitah is there's an isurim. You're not allowed to work the land during Shemitah. That's the whole point of Shemitah. You're not allowed to work the land. The fact that something grows during Shemitah, I'm not a Peros Shvius, right after Minoah Kedusha, that's really just something which results from the main halacha of Shemitah. They have to leave the land fallow. The Isra and Shemitah, real Isra and Shemitah, is to work the land, which has to do with the ownership over the land. And according to Rabbah, the non-Jew acquires ownership over the land. How do I know that? Because he's allowed to make boros, shich, and maros. Others says he can't do that. Rabbah says he can do that. So you see, in terms of the physical mass of land, he does have the rights. He does have those rights in Shemitah. So therefore, when it comes to Shalom, which Hilchos Shemitah is dependent on, Rabbah holds, in fact, that it is transferred to the non-Jewish person, and therefore it doesn't belong to a Jew, and it's the land of Shemitah. It's in Eretz Yisrael, but nonetheless, the Kedusha Shemitah would not apply because it's land of a non-Jew. Trumas and Maisos would apply, but Shemitah would not apply. So there's a fundamental difference between Shemitah and Trumas and Maisos. The Shemitah has to depend with the Gufa Karka, working the land, right, and whatever grows, you have to treat with Kedusha Shemitah. Right, but that's not the main halacha. The main halacha is working the land, as opposed to Trumas and Maisos, which is about the result, the domain of the land, and that the non-Jew is never able to acquire in Israel, according to Rabbah, who we paskin like, and that's why the halachas work out accordingly and nicely. Hope you enjoyed today's share. See you in the next one.